1987 was a tough year in Washington, D.C. The nation's capital endured the Iran-Contra hearings, the rejected Supreme Court nomination of Robert Bork, and the public demise of presidential hopeful Gary Hart. The political climate was just as turbulent for its football team. But the 1987 Redskins overcame it to win their second Super Bowl in 6 seasons. In order to appreciate their story, one must learn the struggles of 2 of their main characters before they became Redskins. Quarterback Doug Williams and cornerback Darrell Green.
Well, in high school, I was a little small kid, about 140 pounds. Decided I wanted to play football around the time I was in the 11th grade. This one guy started laughing at me and, calling me little guy and, what are you doing out here? And I never forgot that. It was great motivation for me. And so through speed, through mental preparation, athletic skill, something I wanted to get their attention and say, hey, who's that kid? And what I call be prepared for that right now moment. Okay, son, what's your name? Green. Okay, you're up right now. And in that right now moment, you need to be ready to perform. I was able to fight and make the varsity my senior year, which was a great feat for me, battling through all the other guys who were ahead of me. Now, from there, it didn't get me a scholarship. I got a map out and traveled 5 hours following roads to get to Texas A&I University, which I'd never visited. And so I wasn't the sought-after kid, but at least they was going to give me a chance. They would give me a chance if I showed up. And I showed up.
While Darrell Green was overlooked because of his size, Doug Williams' struggle for proper recognition was because of the color of his skin.
I was not a highly recruited quarterback out of high school. I went to a small high school, and at that particular time, it was just the beginning of integration in the South. And a lot of the SEC schools really wasn't recruiting African-American quarterbacks.
Williams elected to go to Grambling. Despite finishing 4th in the Heisman Trophy balloting his senior year, Williams received little attention from the NFL and was preparing for life without football.
I was doing student teaching at Carroll High School in Monroe, Louisiana. I've got a bunch of kids running up and down the gym. All of a sudden, Coach Jones told me that somebody was there to meet me, and I asked him who, and he said, Joe Gibbs from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So we went to McDonald's. Out of all places, he was the only guy that actually came to see me from the National Football League.
Based on the recommendation of first-year offensive coordinator Joe Gibbs, the Buccaneers made Williams their first-round pick in the 1978 draft. Prior to the arrival of Williams, the third-year franchise had won just 2 games, and that came after losing 26 in a row. In Williams' second year, the Buccaneers won the NFC Central, defeated the Eagles in the divisional playoffs, and were 1 victory away from playing in the Super Bowl. Midway through the NFC Championship game, Williams tore the bicep on his throwing arm.
There was no way that I can come back to win the game. From there, it seemed like the whole team lost confidence, and the Rams prevailed 9-0.
In 1981, the Bucs returned to the playoffs. The Cowboys pummeled the Bucs and punished Williams. But it was what he received in the mail after the game that hurt him the most.
I got a nice wrapped box. It was a rotten watermelon. The note said, if it wasn't for you, with Joe Black, ASS, we would have won the football game.
The worst for Williams was still to come. Amid a contract dispute with Tampa Bay, his wife of less than a year died of a brain tumor.
That particular time, it wasn't important to me whether or not, I played for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or anybody. I didn't think Hugh Coverhouse, who was the owner, cared whatever happened to me, along with his general manager. They didn't care, and that was the end of history with Tampa Bay.
In 1983, Doug Williams was out of the NFL. That same year, Darrell Green was preparing to enter it.
The 1983 NFL draft was pretty eventful, with John Elway deciding not to go to Baltimore and going to Denver. Dan Marino, he was an incredible player. I trained with Eric Dickerson in Texas. I knew him. It was an incredible group, particularly for me, because going to the combine in my Texas A&I jersey or shirt, they didn't know me from a chicken. They didn't know our school. And so Bobby Bettner says, if you are there, we're going to draft you. Yeah, right. I'm thinking in the back of my mind, yeah, okay, thanks.
Washington Redskins complete the first round with their choice of cornerback Darrell Green, Texas A&I.
Sure enough, they took my name.
Williams' name and quarterbacking skills were called upon to help launch the USFL in 1984. But 2 years later, the league folded. Once again, Williams was left feeling unhappy and unwanted. Just like what happened 8 years earlier, it was Joe Gibbs, now the head coach of the Redskins, who tracked him down.
He called me to let me know that they was interested, but the most important thing was, could I come to Washington to be a backup quarterback? I said, Coach, I don't have a job, so I can be any up, back up or first up or whatever up you want me to be.
In 1986, Jay Schroeder quarterbacked the Redskins to the NFC Championship game, where they faced the Giants.
And in that game, we was getting beat up bad. I can remember Jay got hit and looked like to me was completely out. And Joe Gibbs called me to the sideline and gave me a play and said, go in there. When on my way in,
it's about 600 pounds on top of Schroeder.
I got waved off.
They put Doug Williams into the game, and Schroeder waved him off and said, get out of here.
That was one of the most embarrassing moments of my life, because number one, I thought the coach should have went on taking him out, because you were sending me in, but for him to stand there and wave me off and nobody say, go on and get him out of there, I thought that was embarrassing. So I came back, and that stuck with me for a long, long time, and it still sticks with me.
Jeff Bostic, the team's longtime starting center, received the brunt of the blame for the offensive line's failures in the Redskins' 1986 NFC Championship loss. The Redskins began 1987 by making a change.
Well, it's kind of shocking. I go to training camp, and Joe Bugle put up a depth chart. And all of a sudden, the guy that had typically been our left guard, Russ Grimm, was at center, which meant I was out.
Size was the biggest reason, because going against Philadelphia, he's going to have to line up against Reggie White, who's 300 plus, so we need matchups. We just need a little bit bigger pivot man in there.
I think the Redskins probably should have handled this a little bit differently. Going into training camp, they had to have known that this was what they were going to do. They should have informed me, and they should have informed the media, because I was besieged after the morning practice, and I really had no answers for them.
I don't make decisions. I just have to deal with it the best way I can.
Joe Gibbs next considered a change at the backup quarterback position.
Joe Gibbs said, I got something to tell you. We traded you. I said, you traded me? He said, yeah. He said, we traded you to the Raiders. I thought that was the greatest news of all time, because, you know, when you think about the Raiders, you think about cast-off. And after having been cast off by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the USFL folded and not being a starter, I thought I was a perfect cast-off. Joe told me to come back around noon. He's going to give me all the particulars. I said, okay, Coach. Went into his office, and he looked at me. He said, Douglas, that's what he called me. He said, I changed my mind. I looked at him blank. I said, Coach, you can't change your mind. He said, I got a feeling, and this done is God truth. He looked at me. He said, I got a feeling that somewhere along this season, you're going to come in here and you're going to win this thing for me. And I looked at him, I said, Coach, I said, I understand what you're saying. I said, but I got an opportunity to start. He said, I got a feeling that you're going to be the one to help us win this thing. And it's unbelievable. That was his word. But I left that room, It didn't matter what he said. At that particular time, I wasn't feeling Joe Gibbs.
Just 4 minutes into the season opener, Schrader suffered a sprained shoulder, and Williams had his chance.
When I first got in the game, it was almost like I was untouchable. 4 passes, 4 completion, touchdown.
The celebration was short-lived. After Williams' first touchdown as a Redskin, kicker Jess Atkinson dislocated his ankle on the extra point.
It was an emotional time because the guy was so well respected and loved among us. We all ran out there it's like our little brother got injured. And I remember us holding his hand and praying for him.
The injuries continued to mount. In the first half of the first game, they would not only lose their starting quarterback and kicker, but also their starting running back, George Rogers, and starting center, Russ Grimm. The good news for Jeff Bostic was that he would now be called upon to play. The bad news was he'd frequently be lined up against Reggie White.
I went back to pass, and all of a sudden, I see this big green shirt just put his arms around him. He literally took the ball and turned and ran 70-some yards with that football like a running back.
Reggie White pulled the ball away and took off for a touchdown. He just takes the ball away from him. How did Doug Williams let the ball go?
The game was back in a position where anybody could win it. The very next play, Art Monk was running down the middle of the field again.
Looking in the end zone, got a man, throws it, touchdown, Washington Redskins. Oh, he threaded the needle right there.
Backup kicker Steve Cox sealed the win with a 42-yard field goal.
I just think that's really what sort of characterized our whole season. It was at the right time, in the right moment, something went well for us. And different guys had to, as Joe Gibbs would say, step up.
Two weeks into the 1987 season, the players went on strike. Rather than canceling the games, the owners invited replacement players, to the shock of the Redskin veterans.
Carvello's here. They got some Dennis Woodbury on there. McEwen came back.
When the Redskin replacements arrived for the first practice, the Redskin regulars were there waiting for them.
I've never been a protester. I've never been any part of a riot, but I would say that that's as close as it came. I remember when they brought the replacements in by bus, Darryl Grant actually broke the windshield on one of the buses.
No, you got it.
Not only were there players from the '87 Redskin team, their wives, their children were outside the gates at Redskin Park. I remember R.C. Tillman's wife, Justine, up on his shoulders, yelling out obscenities to players that were on the field.
We're all laughing at you, pal.
94, you're scabbed. You're supposed to catch that thing.
This thing could have really gotten out of control. But Gibbs calls the team together and says, guys, I've got a job to do. I'm going to try and win as many games as we can while you guys are out.
Gibbs discouraged his regulars from crossing the picket line until the strike was over.
He talked about staying unified, which basically says, I don't want you in here. I want you to stay out there. If you're sitting in the player's seat, it was almost unfair for him to say that. Because the reality is, what about that guy that just really needs to come in? Man, I'm broke. You know, I need to play. But it still was the best wisdom. He took a big risk. But that's why he's a Hall of Fame coach, because he's able to take risks. And that's why he's also considered a great leader.
Of the many accomplishments in Gibbs's career, his handling of the 1987 strike may rank near the top. The Redskins were the only team not to have a regular cross the picket line, and the replacements won all 3 of their games. The last victory came against a Dallas team with 7 veterans, including 2 future Hall of Famers. When the strike was over, the Redskins were unified, in first place and primed to make a run at a championship.
It helped us to become the team that ended that season. We didn't have the best talent, but I think togetherness, unity, a sense of purpose, that the '87 Redskins was the best football team in the National Football League that year, simply because we stuck together.
The 1987 players' strike lasted 24 days. In addition to unifying the Redskins, it also gave the injured opening day starters a chance to heal. When the regulars returned, Jay Schroeder reclaimed the starting quarterback spot. Doug Williams was back on the bench, and Jeff Bostic's only job was long snapping on special teams.
I had a tough time snapping that year. I feel like I cost ourselves an opportunity to at least go to an overtime against Atlanta. We get beat 21-20, and I had a couple balls that I rolled back on the ground that day.
Bostic's problems in dealing with a demotion have translated to his on-field performance. He is now relegated to snapping on punts, and the Redskins won't keep a guy around who can only do one job.
Coach Gibbs probably made the biggest mistake of his coaching career. He called my house and got my wife. And my wife goes, "Are you calling to tell me that you're cutting him?" And he says, "Oh, no, we're just going to take him off a long snapping." And I think for the next hour, my wife absolutely chewed his ear off. And if you'll ask Joe Gibbs to this day, which wife has chewed you out the most of anybody of any player you've ever coached, I'll be willing to bet it's Len Bostic.
Although his wife was furious, a resigned Bostic accepted his latest demotion.
I kept telling myself I've always been a team player. I'm going to say the right things, I'm going to do the right things, and I'm going to prepare as if I were playing. But there was one thing that absolutely burned me up that season. The coaching staff decides to plug in Derek Brills as a starter, a guy that was cut during training camp, that was part of the replacement squad, that they kept on the roster and was starting in front of me now that one of the front five had gone down. And I remember going to Joe Gibbs' office and told him, "You've got to trade me. This is not right." And his response was, "Just be patient." He says, Joe Bugle feels a little bit more comfortable with this guy. I said, "I need to get out of here, Joe." I said, I think our time is about run out here." He says, "Just be patient."
Gibbs's patience was being tested by Jay Schroeder's slump and the quarterback controversy that followed. The controversy was fueled by comments from Bobby Mitchell. In addition to being the assistant general manager, Mitchell had also been the first black player on a Redskins team that was the last to integrate.
Bobby Mitchell went on a radio show and stated that some of the players felt like Doug Williams should be the starting quarterback, and Joe Gibbs is a no controversy type of guy, and he was really, really mad. Joe did not like those comments, but the bottom line was they was truthful.
I think the difference between Doug and Jay Schroeder, Doug really appreciated the offensive line, and Jay never really noticed it or mentioned it. It was the me, my, and I syndrome for Jay Schroeder.
Jay wasn't popular with nobody in the locker room, basically, because as a quarterback, I always felt like you got to have a team to rally around you. And I think Jay thought maybe he was a lot better than most people because he was the starting quarterback of the Redskins and didn't have to stoop down to be like the other guys. And basically that's how he carried himself, that he was the man and nobody else mattered.
With the Redskins 6-2, for the first time in his coaching career, Gibbs benched his starting quarterback in the middle of a game.
I think Joe was smart enough to realize that I can't afford to not only lose the football game, I can't lose my team. And he felt that the players rally around Doug Williams, and he saw it, and it happened that way.
Williams entered in the second quarter with the score tied at 3 and immediately threw 2 touchdowns.
That stadium went crazy. The fans started jumping and stomping and rocking.
Redskins defense now facing the crunch. As if by cue, the crowd comes alive. Long turns around to the Ben Drive and says, "I can't hear." He's coming over to the Redskins bench. Joe Gibbs took off his head. Now he's coming out. I've never seen a coach do that. Now here come the Lions, and the Redskins are ready for him. Here goes the snap. He's back. Going to get rushed. Picked off by Darrell Green. Now try to quiet the crowd.
If you've never been to RFK Stadium, I think you missed a treat, because it's the only stadium I know that rocks, literally rocks.
It was 55,000 seats, one of the smallest stadiums in the NFL. It was dirty, it was old. Nobody ever understood what was so special about that dump. They didn't know that was our dump. We felt at home there.
I was the fastest kid in my neighborhood. I was the fastest kid in my elementary school. I was the fastest kid in my college, the fastest kid in my conference. I was the fastest of the Redskins.
But all of a sudden, Darrell Green starts to pull on Willie Gault. He won't catch you. Darrell Green is the fastest man in the NFL.
And I had recorded the fastest time in the world just prior to me getting drafted, and then I went on through the draft and got out of track. I just think that there are fast guys, and then there are fast guys, and then there are fast guys that can play football, and then there are fast guys that can't. I really considered myself ultimately a football player that was fast.
Nobody chased Tony Dorsett down from behind. Darrell Green did. Nobody caught Eric Dickerson from behind, but Darrell Green did.
I'm under the impression that I can run down anybody.
Green's speed was put to the test when the 7-2 Redskins faced the Rams.
They had a returner that was a world-class sprinter, and we were going to kick it to him, and we were going to kick his butt all week long.
Ron Brown settles underneath it at the 5. He's to the near side, 10, 15 to the 20. Big hole, 30. Wally Haji Sheik won't get him. Darrell Green's chasing him at the 30, the 20, it's the 15, the 10. Green dives and misses. Who's the fastest man in the National Football League? Ron Brown is. Darrell Green couldn't catch him.
This guy was a Olympian in the 4x1 relay. So I don't feel as bad about not catching him, but that really was a big play for them.
We knew the Rams had only won 2 games, and we couldn't afford to let the Rams come into Washington and defeat us at that particular time.
Williams rallied the Redskins from 21 down to within 4.
I raced a couple defenders to the end zone, and at the end of that play, I felt something pop in my back, but I wasn't coming out at that particular time. The injury hadn't really set in, so I was able to finish the football game.
In the game's closing moments, Williams had 2 chances to score the go-ahead touchdown.
The first one hit off Art Mark's hand and went out of bounds. The second one hit off his hand and was intercepted. It was a very, very bad game for us.
Williams told Gibbs his back injury was too severe to be able to play in the next game.
One thing about myself, I know me, and pain was something that I never worried about. I played through pain all my life. If I could have played any way, any shape or form, there's nowhere in the world I would have relinquished the starting quarterback job to Jay Schrader.
While Williams bowed out to Schrader, an injury to starting center Russ Grimm presented an opportunity for Jeff Bostic.
And it's kind of funny, they decided at that point they're going to plug me back into the starting lineup. And the team that we were playing the next week were the New York Giants.
The game began just like the '86 NFC Championship, with the Giants defense dominating and the Redskins trailed 16-0 at the half.
And then all of a sudden, the tides turned, and Jay's playing pretty well and was able to bring us back. In my mind, I'm thinking, what is Joe going to do?
Even though Williams was now healthy, Gibbs named Schrader his starting quarterback for the future.
I was obviously disappointed because, you hold a man to his word, and his word was, if you're injured, you can't lose the job. That's one of the first time I felt like Joe Gibbs had let me down.
I remember talking to him. I said, Doug, this is probably not what's best for our football team. I said, it certainly hasn't been the year that neither you nor myself want to remember. I said, but the thing I can tell you, I've been patient all year long, and you've been patient. And you're going to continue to be patient, and you'll have another opportunity. He didn't like it, Members of our team didn't like it. I didn't like it. And fortunately for Doug Williams, and fortunately for the Redskins, he had another opportunity to play.
3 weeks after clinching the NFC East, Schrader struggled in the season finale, and Williams got another chance.
And I came in and played well. Was able to hit Ricky Sanders a couple times. One time when he was one-on-one with Jesse Solomon, and late in the game we came back with a hitch. He took the ball all the way down towards the end zone and we scored, and we was able to kick a field goal and win that game.
After the game, Gibbs announced that Williams would be his starting quarterback heading into the playoffs.
Way to go, man. Way to go, Douglas.
Doug Williams' biggest concern was not his record as a starter, but rather the Chicago cold.
I never really played in anything below zero type of weather, so it was going to be my first time. I know during pregame warm-up, I felt like I didn't have any hands. I couldn't even feel the football, and I'm in the dressing room saying, man, how am I going to play this game? First game I ever played with gloves on, and I didn't know what to expect. And we went out there, and we went down early, 14-0. All of a sudden, we started rallying back. Before you know it, we was back in the football game.
With the game tied in the third quarter, Joe Gibbs decided the time had come to try to get a big play on special teams.
And you knew it was a big moment in a game when Joe Gibbs put Darrell Green back as a returner. Darrell Green was not used very often during his 20-year career as a kick returner.
I had my hands in my warmers. I didn't pull my hands out until the ball got there. It was really that cold. That was that right now moment. And I was very fortunate in that I developed these habits as a young man of being ready for that right now moment.
Green driven back to midfield on the far side. He's got the ball up to the 45, far side 40, a seam to the 35, vaults a man to the 30, breaks it to the near side 25, watch out to the 20, near side 10, he's gone, touchdown, Washington Redskins. Darrell Green returns the punt 50 yards.
I made one cut up the field and had to vault one guy. When I landed on my feet, I had to make an immediate left-hand turn. That's when I pulled the rib cartilage and just took my other hand and gave pressure right to that spot. I didn't play anymore because that rib injury was pretty tough.
Green's punt return propelled the Redskins to the NFC Championship game, a game Green did not think he'd be healthy enough to play in.
My coaches, Richie Pettibone, called me and said, you know, I need to know if you can play. I'm in preparation to put our game plan together, and I need to know where you stand. And I said, I don't know where I stand. And he kind of pressured me and said, well, hey, I need to know where you stand. I said, well, as far as I'm concerned, just consider me not playing. This injury in my ribs is pretty substantial.
So we were talking to Darrell Green about, you need to take the shot of Novocaine and play.
And I initially said, no way, I'm not going to let anybody shoot me right in my ribs and numb anything. And kind of got a little bit, you know, a little heated, you know.
He was not real fond of needles. And the more we talked to him, says, you know, Darrell, this is a NFC Championship game. This is a chance to go to a Super Bowl. You need to be out there.
And went back to the coach and said, hey, I'm going to play. I can get this shot. I feel good about it.
Sunday afternoon, just before kickoff, he took that shot. And I bet it's the only shot he ever took in his NFL career.
On the Redskins' opening drive, Doug Williams took his shots downfield, and Washington seized the early lead.
Seemed like everything was going pretty easy for the first quarter and a half, and we kind of hit a wall.
And the Vikings started rallying and then eventually tied the game 10-10. And the next time we had the ball, we realized that we had to do something.
Back is Williams, looking right, fires it into the end zone, touchdown, Washington Redskins. Gary Clark.
The Redskins' lead was 7, but there was still plenty of time for one last Vikings drive.
Well, I'm on the sideline At roughly the 6-minute mark, my shot is worn off. I'm not getting another shot. You know, I've already made that decision. But the pressure of the game, just the adrenaline, I just ran back out there because I just felt that, this is a moment.
With less than a minute to play, the Vikings had one last chance from the Redskins' 6-yard line.
4th down and 4. One down to the Super Bowl. Joe Gibbs down on one knee where he can see. Yeah. Down on both knees so he can see.
So he can say a prayer.
I know myself, I had everything I can crossed.
And my position was always that the game will go through the man that brought them to the dance. So my attitude was, I'm ready to cover Anthony Carter. They were thinking, clear everything out, try to get a one-on-one situation with Darren Nelson. The ball is coming here, it's on.
Wilson takes the snap, looking left, throws it into the end zone. Sends it away, incomplete. Redskins are going to the Super Bowl.
That was a thrill. I remember jumping up and running down the field. I'm thinking, I'm going to the Super Bowl.
Joe Gibbs looks like he's ready to collapse. What excitement, Frank.
I can actually tell you what happened on that last play. Anthony Carter actually was supposed to go outside.
Anthony didn't really clear the field out the way he really should have. He kept me in the vicinity of the ball, and I was able to see it.
So he just played the ball and knocked the ball down.
It was the most electrifying situation I've ever been in. And so that was the one. That was the one I always remember.
During Super Bowl week in San Diego, the media focused their attention on Doug Williams, the first black quarterback to start in a Super Bowl.
One of the questions that came out the blue was, how long had you been a black quarterback?
I mean, he could have really said some things that could have infuriated some people.
Well, the most
but he handled the media well.
Joe Gibbs, Bobby Bevan, Jack King Cook didn't bring Doug Williams to San Diego to show off a black quarterback. We know why we came here. We came here to work hard and win the Super Bowl.
Coach Gibbs demonstrated his faith in Williams by revealing to him his plan to give a rookie his first start at running back.
He told me that I'm going to start Timmy Smith. I looked at him, I said, Timmy Smith? He said, yeah. He said, nah, nobody knows it. I said, but I'm telling you. And what I want you to do is not tell him, but just stay on him all week. And just make him work. And Timmy and we was pretty close. And I used to mess with him all the time. And that week, I just talked to him and said, hey, man, you got to be ready to play. If you get in this game and you screw up, you fumble, I said, I'm kicking your ass. I said, because this is my first time in the Super Bowl. He said, I hear you, old man. And he'll start laughing. I said, I'm not bullshitting with you. I kick your ass. And then he realized that I was serious. And he said, okay, old man, if I get a chance to play, I'll show you.
I didn't have any clue that Timmy Smith was going to start until he showed up in the huddle the first series. I think they must have told Timmy just before kickoff.
The Super Bowl was Timmy Smith's right now moment. On the Redskins' first drive, there was nothing to indicate anything special would come of it, while Denver's offense enjoyed the ultimate fast start.
Boom, first play, John Elway throws this 400-yard bomb over Barry Wilburn for a touchdown.
Can you believe that? In one play, the Broncos are up. He beat Barry Wilburn on it.
Now, I remember clearly to this day taking a beeline toward Barry Wilburn and saying, forget that play right now.
The hits kept coming. The Redskin deficit grew to 10, and then disaster appeared to strike.
I was in there towards the end of the first quarter, went back to pass, and for some reason or another, that turf kind of slipped from under my feet, and I went back and hyperextended my knee. And I'm laying there, and I saw the trainers come on. I just put my hand down, telling them not to touch me.
Now, that was a moment on the sideline. He had really won the respect as the single leader. You know, in the beginning, it was him and Jay Schroeder, but now you really are the guy, and we really do expect you to do it, and if you don't do it, it won't get done.
That's good. Yeah, it's just that sting, that initial sting.
At that particular time, I'm thinking in my mind, if I'm able to get up and walk, that I was going to finish this football game, pain or no pain. And I remember Joe Gibbs walking over to me. He looked at me. He said, "You can go." I said, "I'm ready, Coach."
A torn bicep once prevented Williams from going to a Super Bowl with Tampa. A sprained knee wasn't about to stop Williams from winning a Super Bowl with Washington.
The Washington Redskins offense is back on the football field, and so is number 17, Doug Williams.
On his first snap, Williams threw an 80-yard touchdown to Ricky Sanders. The play ignited the greatest offensive explosion in Super Bowl history.
We're coming back. We're going to do it.
Williams to pass, lobs it up. He's got Clark at the goal line. He's got it. Touchdown, Washington Redskins. He'll hand off to Smith, the deep back. Good hole. Midfield. Horse race to the 40. Far side 35, 30, 25, 20, 15, 10, 5. Touchdown, Washington Redskins. Oh, should fake this time. Faked out everybody. He's got Sanders in the clear at the 10. Touchdown, Washington Redskins. We are seeing a virtuoso performance.
You're watching history. This is history in the making.
Get another one right here.
The second quarter, we only ran 18 plays, and we scored 35 points. When we went in at halftime, Joe Bugle walked up to me and he said, "Stud, I think we got this one wrapped up." He knew my knee had swollen up, and he said, "You don't have to play the second half." And there was no way that day that Jay Schroeder was going to play. The offensive line knew I was hurt, and they knew that the most important thing was not to let anybody touch Doug Williams. I never seen an offensive line dominate a defensive front like our offensive line did. I'll never, ever forget what they did for me on that particular day.
They should definitely get word to Joe Gibbs on the bench. Tell him how close Timmy Smith is to that record.
Here comes Timmy Smith again over the left side. Good hold. That should just about do it.
He's got to go over 200 yards.
Will be the single-game rushing leader in Super Bowl history.
That's got to do it.
Timmy Smith, you're talking about a one-game wonder. I don't think I've laid eyes on him since that day. I don't remember seeing him again after that season. So I don't know where he is, and he had an incredible game. But if you look at the footage, probably you and I could have ran through those holes.
Those holes were huge. They weren't big. They were huge. You could have driven trucks through them. Pickup trucks.
I thought it was just the most incredible game to watch, because basically that's what I did. I watched the game. I didn't get any passes. I didn't get to run any punts. I was just there and glad to be there.
Most valuable player of Super Bowl 22 is quarterback Doug Williams of the Washington Redskins.
The first black quarterback to start a Super Bowl, the first black quarterback to win a Super Bowl. Tell you what, I hope Doug Williams does. I hope he puts to bed once and for all about the black athlete in professional football.
I can remember Joe Jacoby walking up to me. Doug Williams, he say, "Black, red, green, or yellow, you our quarterback." There was a lot of African Americans that was proud of Doug Williams that day. But I also think there was a lot of fans as a whole that was proud of Doug Williams that day.
You love a guy like Doug Williams. I mean, it brings chills to me right now just thinking about it. I mean, the guy is a special guy. And I couldn't have been happier for anybody on that team.
Walking off the field after the Super Bowl and my helmet in the air, I thought about from which I've come, from the rocky roads of Zachary, Louisiana, through Grambling, through Tampa, losing my wife, the USFL, and finally getting the opportunity to play in Washington. So many things went through my mind walking off that field.
I mean, people ask you to describe what it feels like to win a Super Bowl. I don't know that anybody can adequately describe that. 87 was unquestionably the most frustrating, disappointing, thrilling, and satisfying season all in one.
As a guy that probably has had more adversity than anybody on this team, this must be a sweet victory.
I just can't wait till we have to get our rings fitted for that Super Bowl ring.
After the Super Bowl, we had an opportunity to go to the White House and present President Ronald Reagan with a football and a jersey, and I was on crutches, and I had a chance to get to the podium.
I have a token of appreciation also. I'm going to give it to the president upon one circumstance, that he run the right play. And the play is trips right, fake zoom, Larry crisscross. And he got to throw it.
He got to the mic and he said, "Where's Ricky Sanders?"
Where's Ricky Sanders?
And all of a sudden, Ricky Sanders ran across and he threw a perfect pass, and the crowd went wild.
Washington is a town of power. Washington is a town of politics. You got Democrat, Republican, you got white, you got black, you got conservative, you got liberal. The only thing that brings that whole city together are the Redskins. And during that season, I think Doug Williams was probably the biggest driving force in bringing that city together.
To be on stage with the President of the United States coming from a little small town of Zachary, Louisiana, that's big.